Strategized narrative expansion with authentic tone and character depth. Grace Bennett's knees ached as she pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway of Celestial Tower's 4th to 7th floor. The marble beneath her scraped hands gleamed like polished glass, reflecting the artificial stars embedded in the ceiling above. This was where the real money lived. Alien money. The kind that bought penthouses with views of 3 moons and security systems worth more than Grace would earn in 10 lifetimes. She'd been scrubbing floors for 6 years now, ever since humanity stumbled into the galactic community like country cousins showing up at a fancy dinner party. 50 years ago, humans thought they were alone in the universe. Then the galactics arrived, and everything changed. Humans got access to incredible technology, faster than light travel, and a whole universe of opportunities. The catch? Most aliens still looked at humans the way you'd look at someone who just learned to use a fork. Grace didn't mind the work itself. Honest labor never bothered her. What stung was the way alien residents walked past her like she was invisible. Like the trash chute. Like furniture. Her supervisor always said the same thing: keep your head down, do your job, don't make trouble. That was the unofficial motto for humans trying to make it in the galaxy. Tonight felt different, though. Penthouse 47 belonged to some big shot named Theron. A Valesian, which meant money beyond imagination. The Valexians practically invented interstellar banking. This guy was supposedly so rich and so private that Grace had never even seen him during her evening shifts. His automated systems usually kept the place spotless, so she mostly just checked that everything looked perfect. But when the penthouse doors slid open, something was wrong. The lights were dimmed to almost nothing. The temperature was cold, way too cold. And there was a smell in the air, something sharp and metallic that made her stomach twist. "Hello?" Grace called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Housekeeping. Anyone home?" Silence answered her. She should have backed out right then. Should have called her supervisor. Should have followed every rule in the handbook. But something made her step inside, her cleaning supplies forgotten in the hallway. That's when she saw him. The Valesian was sprawled across the white marble floor near the floor-to-ceiling windows. His body was massive, easily 300 pounds of muscle and crystalline bone structure. But what made Grace's breath catch was his skin. Valexians were famous for their bioluminescent skin that glowed with soft, shifting colors. This one's skin was flickering like a dying light bulb, flashing weak pulses of blue and purple before going dark for long, terrifying seconds. "Oh God," Grace breathed, rushing forward. Her hands shook as she knelt beside him. His chest was barely moving. His eyes were half open but unfocused, the pupils dilated wrong. Grace's mind raced. She wasn't a doctor. She was a housekeeper with a high school diploma and some basic first aid training from a community center class she'd taken 3 years ago. But her younger brother Danny worked as a medical assistant at the station's human clinic, and he never shut up about alien physiology. He was obsessed with it, always reading medical journals, always preparing for emergencies nobody else thought would happen. That's when it clicked. The flickering skin. The shallow breathing. The way the Valexian's fingers were twitching in a specific pattern. Neural cascade failure, Grace whispered. Danny had talked about this. There'd been a mining accident 5 years back where 12 Valexians died from some weird chain reaction in their nervous systems. Most alien doctors wrote it off as a freak occurrence, too rare to worry about. But human doctors? They studied it obsessively. Humans came from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill them, so they had this annoying habit of preparing for every possible disaster. Grace looked around frantically. The penthouse's security system had locked down. The usual emergency protocols weren't responding. The Valexian's own medical systems had failed him. If she didn't do something right now, this guy would die on his fancy marble floor while Grace watched helplessly. She made a decision that would change everything. Grace ran to the Valexian's medical cabinet, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Her hands fumbled with the supplies inside. She'd watched Danny practice emergency procedures 100 times. She grabbed what looked like a neural stabilizer, prayed she was reading the alien symbols correctly, and configured it the way she remembered from Danny's late-night rants about proper emergency response. Then she did something that broke about 15 different regulations. She used her emergency maintenance override to bypass the penthouse security systems. Alarms would be going off somewhere, but she didn't care. She physically dragged the 300-pound alien across the floor, her muscles screaming in protest, and hauled him into her beat-up maintenance shuttle parked in the service bay. The shuttle barely fit him. Grace gunned the engines and shot toward the nearest hospital, weaving through traffic like a maniac, ignoring every safety protocol in the book. When she burst through the emergency entrance, She didn't stop yelling until doctors listened. Neural cascade failure. Check for the omega-7 pattern. Now. The alien doctors looked at her like she was insane. A human housekeeper giving them medical advice? But something in Grace's voice made them listen. They ran the tests. Their faces went pale. Or whatever color meant shock for their species. They worked on Theron for 3 hours. Grace sat in the waiting room, her uniform soaked with sweat, her hands still shaking. When a doctor finally emerged, he looked at Grace with something she'd never seen from an alien before, respect mixed with complete confusion. "You saved his life," the doctor said simply. "How did you know?" Grace just shrugged, exhausted. "I'm human. We pay attention." The next morning, Grace showed up for her shift expecting a medal. Maybe some recognition. At minimum, a thank you. Instead, her supervisor handed her a formal write-up for unauthorized penthouse access, misuse of emergency overrides, and reckless operation of a maintenance vehicle. Grace stared at the document, then laughed. It was a bitter sound. That was life as a human in the galaxy. Save someone's life, break a few rules doing it, and get punished for your trouble. She signed the write-up and went back to scrubbing floors. At least the Veilsian was alive. That had to count for something. Strategized narrative expansion with emotional depth and engagement. 7 days passed before Grace heard anything about the Veilsian she'd saved. 7 days of scrubbing the same floors, dodging her supervisor's disappointed glares, and wondering if she'd made a massive mistake. The write-up sat in her file like a criminal record. 3 strikes and you're out, they always said. Grace was now sitting at 2.5. Then the message came through on her worn-out datapad during her lunch break. Report to executive level, Suite 1, tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp. No explanation. No context. Just that cold, official summons that made Grace's stomach drop. She barely slept that night. Executive level was a place humans didn't go unless they were getting fired or sued. Probably both. Grace lay in her cramped apartment, staring at the ceiling, doing math in her head. If she lost this job, she'd lose the apartment. She had 2 other part-time gigs, but they barely covered her mother's medical bills. Mom had gotten sick 2 years ago with something the alien doctors couldn't quite figure out and the human doctors couldn't afford to treat properly. The next morning, Grace put on her cleanest uniform and took the elevator up. She'd never been above floor 50. The executive level was on floor 93. The elevator ride felt like traveling to another planet. Everything up here was different. The air smelled expensive. The walls were made of materials that probably cost more than Grace's entire life savings. Even the artificial gravity felt smoother. A tall, elegant alien receptionist looked Grace up and down with barely concealed disgust. "You're the human? Follow me." Grace followed, her worn shoes squeaking slightly on the pristine floors. They walked past offices with massive windows showing the galaxy spinning outside. Past conference rooms where important aliens made decisions that affected billions of lives. Grace had never felt smaller. The receptionist stopped at a massive door made of something that looked like liquid silver. "Inside. Don't touch anything." The door slid open, and Grace's breath caught. The room was enormous, with a conference table that could seat 20 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the triple moons hanging in space like jewels. And sitting at the head of that table was Theron, the Veilsian she'd dragged to the hospital. He looked healthy now, his skin glowing with steady blue and purple light. Around him sat at least 6 other aliens in expensive suits, all staring at Grace like she was a bug under a microscope. "Sit," Theron said, his voice deep and resonant. It wasn't a request. Grace sat, her hands folded in her lap to stop them from shaking. This was it. They were going to sue her for everything she didn't have. "Grace Bennett," Theron began, and pulled up a holographic display. Grace's entire life appeared in the air between them. Age 28. Born on Earth, moved to New Geneva Station at age 22. Currently employed by Celestial Towers as a housekeeping supervisor. Also works part-time at Jimmy's Diner and does data entry for Wallace Shipping. 3 jobs total. Why? Grace's throat felt dry. "My mother's medical bills." "Ah yes. Linda Bennett. Stage 3 Kellerman's disease. The human doctors want 200,000 credits for treatment. The alien hospitals won't take her insurance." Theron's crystalline eyes fixed on Grace. "You're trying to save her." It wasn't a question, but Grace nodded anyway. "I also see you have a brother. Danny Bennett. Former medical assistant at the human clinic. Lost his license 18 months ago for treating injured humans during the dock riots when alien emergency services refused to respond. Currently works as a custodian. Grace felt anger flash through her fear. He saved lives. People were dying and nobody would help them because they were human. I know, Theron said quietly. I've read the reports. All of them. One of the lawyers leaned over and whispered something urgent in Theron's ear. The Veilsyan waved him off impatiently. My legal team thinks I'm making a mistake, Theron said. They think humans are beneath us. Too primitive. Too emotional. Too short-lived to matter. He stood up, his massive frame towering over the table. But you saved my life when every security system I paid millions for failed me. You recognized a condition my own species doctors misdiagnosed. You broke every rule to get me help. Grace waited for the other shoe to drop. There was always a catch. Theron did something then that made everyone in the room gasp. He placed his right hand over his heart and bowed his head. The gesture was small, but the reaction was massive. The lawyers looked horrified. One actually stood up in protest. Life debt acknowledgement, Theron said formally. I, Theron Valchrist, acknowledge the life debt owed to Grace Bennett of Earth. This debt is binding before the ancestors and the stars. Grace had no idea what that meant, but the room's reaction told her it was huge. One of the lawyers actually said, "You can't be serious. She's human." "She's the reason I'm alive," Theron snapped. Then he looked back at Grace. "But there's more you need to know. That collapse you witnessed? It wasn't random. I'm dying." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "I have maybe 6 months," Theron continued. "Every Veilsyan specialist in the galaxy has examined me. The best doctors from a dozen species have tried to help. They all say the same thing, there's nothing they can do." He leaned forward. "But then you showed up. A human housekeeper with basic first aid training did what they couldn't. You actually helped me." "I just remembered what my brother taught me," Grace said weakly. "Exactly. Human doctors studied that mining accident like their lives depended on it. My people dismissed it. Your species prepares for disasters nobody else thinks about." Theron pulled up another hologram. "I want to hire you." Grace blinked. "To do what?" "Clean your penthouse. To assemble a team of human doctors and researchers. To approach my condition the way humans approach problems, like survivors who refuse to give up." He named a salary that made Grace's head spin. More money than she'd make in 20 years. "This would also clear your family's medical debt. All of it. Immediately." Grace's suspicious nature kicked in. Nothing came free. Especially not from aliens. "Why would you do this?" "Because I'm desperate," Theron said bluntly. "And because if human methods can cure me, the research could help millions. If it fails, at least you'll be paid well for trying." Grace looked at the lawyers, at the fancy room, at the Veilsyan who shouldn't be offering a human anything. "What's the real catch?" Theron smiled, showing teeth. "The catch is that if this works, you'll prove humans are more capable than the galaxy wants to admit. That tends to make powerful people very nervous." Grace thought about her mother dying because she couldn't afford treatment. About her brother losing everything for helping people. About 6 years of being invisible. When do I start? She had no idea she'd just agreed to expose a conspiracy that would shake the entire galactic order. She just knew she was tired of being helpless. Strategized narrative expansion while substituting names and maintaining engagement. Grace's first call was to her brother Danny. They met at a cheap noodle shop 3 blocks from the station's human quarter, the kind of place where aliens never ate. Danny looked older than his 25 years, exhaustion carved into his face from working double shifts as a janitor. "You're joking," Danny said when Grace explained the offer. "A Veilsyan billionaire wants to hire us? This has to be some kind of trap." "That's what I thought too," Grace admitted, pushing noodles around her bowl. "But Mom's medical bills would be gone. All of them. And he's paying enough that you could get your medical license back." Danny's eyes flickered with something Grace hadn't seen in months: hope. "What does he want us to do?" "Save his life when the entire galaxy's best doctors couldn't." They both sat in silence, considering the impossibility of it. Then Danny grinned. "Well, we've always been good at impossible." The team came together faster than Grace expected. Danny brought in Dr. Rachel Hayes, a xenobiologist who'd been blacklisted from every major research facility for suggesting that human immune responses might actually be superior to some alien species. The galactic medical community called her ideas dangerous. Humans called her brilliant. The third member was Tyler Brooks, a former military medic who'd served in the outer colonies. He'd seen combat, treated injuries under impossible conditions, and learned to improvise when proper equipment wasn't available. The military discharged him for excessive risk-taking, which really meant he'd saved too many lives by breaking too many rules. Theron set them up in a private medical facility that looked more advanced than anything Grace had ever seen. Equipment that could scan down to the molecular level. Labs that could synthesize custom medications in minutes. Technology that made human hospitals look like medieval torture chambers. "Don't let it intimidate you," Theron said as he showed them around. "All this fancy equipment failed to help me. Maybe what I need is your human stubbornness." They started with a complete workup. Danny ran every test twice, checking results manually instead of trusting the automated systems. Rachel analyzed Theron's cellular structure, comparing it to databases of Valesian physiology. Tyler reviewed every treatment Theron had received over the past 2 years. After 3 days, they gathered in the conference room. Grace could tell from their faces that something was wrong. "It's not a disease," Danny said quietly. He pulled up a holographic display showing Theron's neural pathways. "Look at this degradation pattern. It's too consistent. Too precise." Rachel nodded, her fingers flying across her datapad. "I've been comparing this to known toxins. Nothing matched at first. But then I started looking at combinations. Specifically, slow-acting compounds that would be nearly impossible to detect with standard medical scans." "Someone's been poisoning him," Tyler said bluntly. "Slowly. Carefully. For probably 2 years." The room fell silent. Grace felt her stomach turn. "That's impossible. Who would?" "That's not even the worst part," Rachel interrupted. She pulled up another display. "I started searching medical databases for similar cases. Mysterious neurological failures in prominent aliens. All diagnosed as rare genetic conditions or unknown diseases." She highlighted case after case. 37 in the past 5 years. All untreatable. All fatal or nearly fatal. Danny leaned forward. "What connects them?" "They all advocated for human rights," Rachel said softly. "A Zentari senator who proposed equal voting rights for humans. A Corvian trade minister who wanted to end discriminatory labor practices. A Valesian banker who tried to give humans access to better loans." She looked at Theron. "What were you working on before you got sick?" Theron's glowing skin flickered. "A scholarship program. To send human students to galactic universities. The Galactic Council killed it in committee." Grace felt cold understanding wash over her. "Someone's eliminating anyone who helps humans." "Not just someone," Tyler said grimly. He pulled up treatment records. "Look at who treated all these patients. The same medical group, Zentari Medical Consortium. The most prestigious, most trusted doctors in the galaxy. The Zentari were one of the oldest species in the galactic community. Their medical knowledge was considered beyond question. They'd been practicing advanced medicine since humans were still living in caves. Nobody would ever suspect them. They're killing people," Grace whispered. "And calling it medicine." Danny stood up, pacing. "The genius is that their medicine is so advanced, nobody questions their diagnoses. If a Zentari doctor says you're dying from a rare condition, everyone believes it. They've been committing murder for years and getting praised for trying to help." Rachel pulled up chemical formulas. "The poison is sophisticated. It mimics natural neural degeneration. But if you know what to look for, if you approach it like a human doctor instead of trusting expensive scans." She looked at Theron. "We can treat this." "How?" Theron asked. "The same way humans treat heavy metal poisoning," Danny explained. "Chelation therapy, adapted for your biochemistry. We flood your system with compounds that bind to the toxins and flush them out. It's aggressive. It's going to be painful. Alien doctors would call it barbaric." Tyler added, "We'll also need targeted nanits based on human immune response protocols. Your body's been fighting this poison for 2 years. We need to give it the right weapons." "Will it work?" Theron asked. "Honestly?" Danny shrugged. "Human medicine is built on treating problems we barely understand with tools we invented yesterday. We're really good at keeping people alive when we have no idea what we're doing. So yeah, it might work." They started treatment the next day. Within a week, Theron's neural readings improved. Within 2 weeks, he was stronger than he'd been in months. The impossible was becoming possible because humans approached problems like survivors, not scientists. But then the news of Theron's recovery started spreading. And 3 weeks into treatment, Representatives from Zentari Medical Consortium requested a facility visit to evaluate the experimental procedures. Grace looked at their credentials and felt ice in her veins. These were the same doctors who treated half the poisoning victims they'd identified. The team had just proven that human medicine could expose the galaxy's most trusted healers as murderers. And now those murderers knew exactly where to find them. The Zentari representatives arrived 3 days later in a sleek transport that probably cost more than Grace's entire neighborhood. They were tall, elegant beings with silver skin and eyes that seemed to see through everything. Their reputation preceded them, the finest doctors in known space, healers who'd saved billions of lives across countless worlds. Grace watched them through the facility's security cameras and felt her hands shake. These weren't just doctors. They were assassins in white coats. Dr. Ventai led the group, his credentials stretching back 300 years. He'd written textbooks that every medical student in the galaxy studied. Governments gave him medals. Universities named wings after him. And according to the evidence Danny had compiled, he'd personally overseen at least 15 of the poisoning cases. "We're here to ensure patient safety," Ventai announced smoothly when Theron met them in the lobby. "These experimental human treatments are concerning. Untested. Potentially dangerous." "They're working," Theron replied coldly. "Which is more than your treatments did." Ventai smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps. But we must verify this recovery is genuine and not simply a temporary improvement before inevitable decline." That's when things started falling apart for Grace's team. The next morning, Rachel was arrested at her apartment. The charges were fraud and illegal medical experimentation. Station security dragged her out in handcuffs while neighbors watched. The news feeds picked it up immediately: disgraced human scientist arrested for endangering alien patient. 2 hours later, Danny's sealed medical records were leaked across the galactic network. His discharge from medical practice, his psych evaluations, everything that could make him look unstable and dangerous. The headlines practically wrote themselves: "Unlicensed human treating billionaire, mental health concerns raised." Tyler's military record hit the news next. Every dangerous mission, every rule he'd bent, every superior officer who'd called him reckless. They made him sound like a violent loose cannon. Grace's own history came last. Her write-ups at work. Her family's debts. They painted her as desperate, willing to do anything for money, even experiment on a dying alien. "They're destroying us," Grace said, watching the news feeds with growing horror. "And making it look legitimate." Theron's lawyers were trying to fight back, but the Zentari had centuries of practice at this. Every move they made looked reasonable, concerned, proper. How could anyone argue against the galaxy's most respected doctors wanting to ensure patient safety? The station authorities raided the medical facility the next day. Safety violations, they claimed. Unauthorized treatments. The fact that those treatments were saving Theron's life didn't seem to matter. They were shutting everything down. Grace stood in the facility's conference room, surrounded by her team and Theron, feeling the walls close in. This was how the Zentari won. Not with obvious violence but with official procedures, legal technicalities, and reputation destruction. By the time they were done, nobody would believe a word the humans said. "We can't fight this," Rachel said quietly. She'd been released on bail but wore a tracking anklet. "They're too powerful. Too connected. So we just give up?" Tyler demanded. "Let them keep killing people. What choice do we have?" Rachel shot back. "Who's going to believe humans over the Zentari Medical Consortium?" That's when Theron did something Grace would never forget. He pulled up a holographic display showing dozens of faces. Aliens of every species imaginable. "These are the other patients," Theron said. "The ones we treated in secret while the Zentari were busy attacking you. 43 aliens who should be dead, now alive because of human medicine. I've been documenting everything." Grace stared at the faces. "You've been treating other people? How? You think I got rich by playing fair?" Theron's skin glowed brighter. "I've been running a shadow operation for weeks. Every prominent alien we could identify who was sick with mysterious conditions. We brought them here at night, your team treated them, and we documented every step." He pulled up medical records, treatment protocols, before and after scans. "The evidence is undeniable." Danny's eyes widened. "You sneaky son of..." "These aren't just any patients," Theron interrupted. "Senator Krelvan, who chairs the Council's Justice Committee. Admiral Torres from the Defense Fleet. Dr. Shoren, who runs the Galactic Medical Board. People who can't be ignored or intimidated. They're going to kill us before we can go public, Tyler said. That's why we're going public right now. Theron pulled up a countdown timer. In 30 minutes, every major news network in the galaxy is receiving this data simultaneously. The medical records. The treatment protocols. The pattern of poisonings. Everything. I've also sent copies to every government, every university, every medical board. They'll call it fake, Rachel protested. They'll try, Theron agreed. But the patients are going to speak for themselves. I've arranged a live press conference. 43 aliens who should be dead, standing together, all treated by humans. Some of them are the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Grace felt something unfamiliar, hope. The Zentari can't silence everyone. Exactly. They've spent centuries building their reputation. We're going to destroy it in one afternoon. Theron looked at each of them. But this only works if you're willing to stand up there with me. The galaxy needs to see the humans who solved what we couldn't. They need to see your faces. Tyler stood up first. I've faced worse than angry doctors. Rachel nodded slowly. If we're doing this, we're going all the way. Danny looked at Grace. What do you think? Grace thought about 6 years of scrubbing floors. Of being invisible. Of her mother dying because they couldn't afford proper care. Of her brother losing everything for saving lives. Of every human who'd been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. I think it's time the galaxy learned something important, Grace said. You can ignore us. You can treat us like servants. But when everything else fails, when your fancy technology and superior knowledge don't work, we're the ones who figure out how to survive. That's what humans do. The press conference went live 30 minutes later. The galaxy watched as 43 prominent aliens stood beside 4 humans and 1 Valesian billionaire. They watched as patient after patient testified about mysterious illnesses, failed treatments, and desperate hope. And they watched as Grace Bennett, a housekeeper from Earth, presented evidence of the largest medical conspiracy in galactic history. The Zentari Medical Consortium tried to respond. They called it propaganda, lies, human manipulation. But they couldn't explain the recovered patients. They couldn't dispute the medical evidence. They couldn't silence the voices demanding investigations. By nightfall, arrests were beginning. Medical licenses were being suspended. The conspiracy was unraveling. Grace stood with her team, watching the news coverage, and realized they just changed everything. Not by being better than aliens. But by being exactly what humans had always been, too stubborn to quit, too creative to be stopped, and brave enough to drag the dying to safety even when the entire galaxy said it was impossible. Orchestrated engaging narrative expansion maintaining human authenticity and platform compliance standards. 6 months felt like a lifetime. Grace stood in front of the massive glass windows of the Galactic Medical Council chambers, watching transport ships come and go from the station below. She wore actual professional clothes now instead of a housekeeping uniform. The change still felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin. Behind her, the council chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives from 200 species filled the seats, all here for the same reason, to decide humanity's place in galactic medicine. The Zentari investigation had shattered everything. 12 senior doctors were awaiting trial. 20 more had their licenses permanently revoked. The prestigious Zentari Medical Consortium was essentially finished, their 300-year reputation destroyed in 6 months. But that left a massive question: what came next? Grace's datapad vibrated. A message from Danny: "You nervous?" She smiled and typed back, terrified. She wasn't here to defend herself anymore. The criminal charges against her team had been dropped within weeks of the press conference. Rachel's record was cleared. Danny had his medical license restored with an official apology. Tyler received commendations from the same military that discharged him. They'd gone from criminals to heroes practically overnight. But the galaxy didn't change its mind about humans that easily. Some species celebrated what Grace's team had done. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent. Humans getting too confident, too capable, too important. The old guard especially hated it. For centuries, they'd been the smart ones, the advanced ones, the ones who knew better. Having humans prove them wrong was humiliating. Ms. Bennett. A council aide appeared at her elbow. They're ready for you. Grace took a deep breath and walked into the chamber. 200 pairs of alien eyes turned to watch her. Some looked curious. Some looked hostile. A few looked almost hopeful. She'd prepared a speech, practiced it a dozen times with Theron's communications team. But standing there under all those stares, the fancy words evaporated. Grace decided to do what she did best, tell the truth plainly. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing floors, she began. Most of you wouldn't have noticed me if I cleaned your offices. I was just another human doing work nobody else wanted. That's what we were to you. Janitors. Servers. The people who fix things when they break. Some council members shifted uncomfortably. Good. Then I saved a life because I paid attention to something everyone else ignored. My team cured diseases your best doctors called impossible. We exposed a conspiracy because we asked questions nobody else thought to ask. Grace looked around the chamber. And you know what the crazy part is? We didn't do anything special. We just did what humans always do. We survived. She pulled up a holographic display. This is my proposal. The Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. Human doctors train alongside alien physicians. We share techniques, approaches, knowledge. You teach us your advanced technology. We teach you our problem-solving methods. The murmuring started immediately. A Corvian representative stood up. You're suggesting humans should train our doctors. I'm suggesting we work together, Grace corrected. Your medicine is incredible. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. But you've gotten comfortable. When something doesn't fit your models, you ignore it instead of investigating. Humans can't afford to ignore problems. We come from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us, so we learn to look at situations from every possible angle. A Zentari representative, one of the few not facing charges, spoke up coldly. These are isolated cases. Your success rate cannot be sustained. Danny stood from the audience section. Actually, it can. We've been tracking outcomes for 6 months. Human-involved treatment protocols show 42% better success rates for complex cases. The data's publicly available if you want to check. Rachel added, we've also identified 17 different treatment approaches that human medicine uses which have direct applications to alien physiology. The research papers are already published. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported the idea immediately, especially those who'd benefited from human treatment. Others resisted fiercely, calling it dangerous, premature, insulting to established medical authorities. Then Theron walked in. He moved with perfect health now, his skin glowing bright and steady. Behind him came the 43 patients from the press conference. Senators. Military leaders. Scientists. Corporate executives. People the council couldn't dismiss or ignore. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, alive, when they should have been dead. Living proof that human medicine worked. The vote took 3 hours of debate. Grace watched the tally climb on the holographic display, her heart pounding. It was close. Terrifyingly close. Some species voted as blocks. Others split internally. The Zentari delegation walked out rather than vote at all. Final count, 127 in favor, 109 against, 14 abstaining. The Interspecies Medical Exchange Program passed by the slimmest margin possible. But it passed. Grace exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Around her, the humans in the audience were celebrating quietly. They'd done it. They'd forced the galaxy to recognize humanity as medical equals. Afterwards, Grace found herself back at Celestial Towers. Not as a maid this time, but visiting the new program's first class. 30 human medical students were training in the station's advanced hospital, working alongside alien colleagues not as servants but as partners. She watched them through the observation glass. A young woman was performing a complex procedure with a Corvian surgeon supervising. A guy Grace's age was teaching an alien resident about human pattern recognition techniques. They looked confident. Like they belonged there. A young custodian pushing a cleaning cart stopped when she recognized Grace. Is it true? The girl asked nervously. Did you really change everything? Grace looked at the girl's worn uniform, her tired eyes, her hopeful expression. She saw herself 6 months ago. I just did my job, Grace said honestly. The galaxy wasn't ready to accept that doing our job well was enough. She pulled out her data pad. You interested in medicine? The girl's eyes went wide. I couldn't afford the training. The exchange program has full scholarships. Room, board, everything covered. Here. Grace sent her the application information. Look it over. If you want help with the application, message me. The girl clutched her data pad like it held the secrets of the universe. Maybe it did. Thank you, she whispered. Grace watched her go, then looked back at the medical students. This was the real change. Not the council vote or the public recognition. It was human kids getting chances they never had before. It was the galaxy slowly learning what Grace's team had proven: humans weren't lesser. They were different. And different could be exactly what you needed when nothing else worked. Her data pad buzzed. Theron wanted to meet about expanding the program to engineering. Rachel had 3 universities requesting human researchers. Danny was being offered a position at the Galactic Medical Institute. Grace smiled and headed for the exit. She had work to do. Real work. Important work. The kind that changed lives. And somewhere out there, another human was scrubbing floors, waiting for their chance to show the galaxy what humanity could really do. That's what made humans formidable. Not that they were stronger or smarter than aliens. But that they never stopped trying. Never stopped adapting. Never stopped proving that survival wasn't about having the best technology or the fanciest degrees. It was about being too stubborn to quit, too creative to be stopped, and brave enough to drag the dying to safety even when everyone said it was impossible. That was humanity. And finally, the galaxy was learning to respect it.